how exciting would this have been in 1911 when the horse was the fastest thing you'd ever been on?
You were talking about seatbelts early. You wouldn't want a seatbelt. You want to be thrown out of this.
Yeah, you want to be thrown way out. Welcome to episode of Jay Leno Garage. Today, a real piece of automotive history. This is an EMF race car. Now, if you've never heard of EMF, you're probably not alone, but at one point between 1908 and I guess about 1911 or 12, they were the fourth best-selling car in America. They were ahead of Cadillac, of course behind Ford, who's outselling everybody. But it just shows you how quickly success and failure come and go in the automobile business. There were three men. There was Everett, Metzger, and Flanders. EMF, they put the names together to build the cars. And they took a lot of heat. I think they used to say EMF stood for every mechanic's friend, if I'm not mistaken. You know, people always do that one another. But this is a car taken off the assembly line with a stock engine, nothing tricky, no overhead valves, none of that. It's a flathead, Model 30, set up in a speedster configuration like this. The man that owns this car has quite a bit of history, Dale Critz Jr. Come on in. Dale, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for bringing this. This is, you know, I've heard about these and I've seen pictures of them, but they are so rare. There can't be very many of them left. And this one, you can trace back all the way to the factory because it's been a race car its whole life, hasn't it?
It has. It was taken right off the assembly line and brought to Savannah a couple of weeks later to race in the Tiedemann Cup, which was the light car race that preceded the Vanderbilt Cup in 1911.
Right, because prior to this, you'd get these cars, they'd put huge engines, 14-liter, 18-liter, and they'd put them in a car, and then and the front ends would just plow into corners, and guys would go, but they were fast. You know, cars have always been fast. It's stopping and going around corners. Right. Is the way the sophistication came in. Like the Mercer was the first sort of purpose-built. It was light, it was agile. You know, even the Stutz had a bigger engine up front. Right. Where the Mercer might lose them on the straights, but they catch them in the corners, as they say, you know. But this was really a stock chassis and everything, just with the body off and a couple of racing seats and maybe a little compression build in the engine possibly, but that's about all, huh?
That's about right. Straight pipes. And it had maximum of 230 cubic inches to be in the light car class, and also about 1,200 pounds.
And I think they started the light car class because just people were getting killed in the other classes. Because, you know, much like cars of the 60s, the engines just overpowered the chassis. They only had rear wheel brakes. You just couldn't stop. I mean, they got up to 70, 80, 100 miles an hour. In fact, I think the Savannah, Georgia race was where they started the light car the first time, so smaller cars could have a chance to compete against these, you know, big monsters.
Right, and actually before they started the Savannah races, they put on a race in March of 1908 that what they called stock car races.
Right.
They took some cars right off the assembly line and to show they could do it. And
not like today where they call a stock car. I mean, it was a car literally like the Mercer Raceabout. It came off the assembly line, they took the fenders off, and they sent it to Indianapolis. I think it came in second in the very first race. What else do we have here? So no front brakes, obviously.
A single hand, they got a handbrake in the rear. Right. That was, you know, not particularly effective.
And as you can see, you have a center throttle, correct?
Correct.
That was pretty common back in the day. It seems almost more natural to have your foot on the center throttle, because when you slide your foot over, you usually hit the side of the wall of the car, and the gas pedal is right there. Right. You know, so I like a center throttle, but if you're not used to it, you're going along, let me slam on the brake. You just floored it, and you just run into stuff. And of course, it has a manometer right up there, which is how you see if your car is overheating. You see the glass in the center. If the red line goes all the way to the top, you're probably too hot. You want about halfway through there.
And when it raced in 1911, it wouldn't have had a motometer. I don't think they invented those until the next year. Right. But we drive this thing a lot, and when we race, pretend race, and so we've used a motometer.
Now, normally you have an exhaust cutout, but you've got probably just pretty much a hollow exhaust here, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so, okay.
You want to be careful when you're getting in and out on that
Is this oil or fuel pump?
That would be both, actually. But the fuel pump during the race keep it pressurized. But we've got valves on the other side to switch between oil and fuel.
Okay, because see, the riding mechanic would sit here, and while you're racing it, he's keeping the fuel pressure on by doing that. And then also, these use a lot of oil.
Yes.
So rather than stop and pull into the pits, you had a separate oil tank right here, correct?
That's
This is gas. And look how much extra oil you're
well,
carrying.
It's constant loss oil system.
Oh, that's right. This is total loss, isn't it? So it just kind of goes through. All right. Now in England, these would be leather with grease packed in them, but this looks like a twine.
This is twine that's been impregnated with oil that keeps it lubricated as well.
And these here in the front and the back, those are called dampers. People sometimes confuse them with shock absorbers, but they're not. You know, for every action is a reaction, like when something goes down, boing, boing. So if you didn't have that, what you have is pieces of wood in there, and you tighten them down, and the wood presses against you. So when the spring goes down, it comes back very slowly, so you don't pogo down the road as you go down the road. And that was sort of the idea. And then you'd adjust them depending on the track you're in. Notice you have grease cups on each, around the kingpins and around any kind of parts that move in the suspension. Because these kind of things, you had to oil them after every race. And yeah, no seat belts, of course.
No, the riding mechanician would hang on to the driver. The driver hung on to the steering wheel.
The reason they did it, what would happen is when they got to Indianapolis, guys would go around the track at 100 or 120 miles an hour. They'd pull into the pits at 40, and the mechanic would junk out and just usually sometimes get killed because they thought they were going, you know, 7, 8 miles an hour. And if you've never done that, I remember I was at Willowbrook with the Corvette, and we were lapping at 204 miles an hour and slowing down to 60. It can't be going 60, but we were.
Felt like.
Yeah, from 200, yeah, exactly. Here you have, of course, you have a hand throttle, and you have adjusting your ignition, advance and retard. This one's pretty complete. You got to even have a clock.
Yeah.
And you have a tachometer.
Right.
And the tachometer goes to an amazing 1,500 RPM. Boy, I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? Just because 1,500 revolutions a minute, there wasn't a lot moving at that speed in those days.
That's right.
And the speedometer goes to an amazing 60 miles. That's a mile a minute.
Well, it actually averaged 58 miles an hour around the 17-mile course in 1911.
Right. And we probably said it before, but in the early days of the 20th century, speed was the first new sensation, you know. There was no inherent fear of speed. All our lives had an inherent fear of darkness. You put a baby in a dark room, it starts crying. Put them in a convertible going 50, hold them up, they laugh because it's brand new.
Yeah.
I mean, armies moved at 5.2 miles an hour across Europe. World War I came, suddenly they were moving at 30 miles an hour, and they could cross entire countries in a matter of a few days instead of weeks and months, you know. So to see something going a mile a minute was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And pretty scary too. And hundreds of thousands of people turned out for these races.
They did. There was over 200,000 people came to. They came on trains. They came on boats.
And that was in 1911.
Right.
When it was a chore to, you know,
get somewhere.
To leave your town was a huge deal. You know, so to go to a race that was 30 or 40 miles away, but that's how exciting it was to people.
It was.
You know, there was fire and noise and just all, you know.
And thankfully in Savannah, no big wrecks like they had or no big pedestrian incidents like they had in Long Island. And when you think about it, the races, they weren't all stacked up, so there'd be a lot of time between cars, and people would tend to want to cross the road.
And there were people who became overnight, like Barney Oldfield.
He was there.
Jimmy Murphy, all these kind of guys. You know, it was pretty amazing. Yeah, it was just a whole new way of life. It was, you know, the Wright brothers were flying in the air, cars were going around, like, what's going on here with the world, you know? So let's see, can we open her up and take a look at the engine?
Let's do.
Put this down like that. Which side? Let's look this side first. Here we go. One spark plug per cylinder. A lot of them had to. This is not a T-head. This is just a regular.
An L-head. An L-head.
Yeah.
And
L-head,
did have. At one point had 2 spark plugs per cylinder. We've replaced them with the cups to make it a lot easier to start.
I thought it'd be easier to start with more
Well, you weren't. You could choose which magneto. They weren't running both at the same time.
Oh, they never did?
No,
okay. Oh,
no. It was only in case you had a problem with one magneto.
And we've talked about these before. These are primer cups. In cold weather, you'd put a little bit of gas in there. You'd turn that like that. The gas would go into the cylinder. You'd shut it again. So when you pulled the handle, the spark would, you didn't have to wait for it to pull the fuel up through the carburetor and all that kind of stuff.
It works good in hot weather too when you haven't started it.
Now, did this have 2 mags on it as well?
It did have 2 mags.
Okay, okay. Very nice. But this is a pretty bulletproof design back in the day. There's a lot of water area around these valves to keep them cool because gas octane was 60, 45,
right.
Not much. Whether they could run it on. Now, what do you run for oil, like a 50 weight? Or
30 weight HD.
30, oh, okay.
Non-detergent.
Yeah, yeah. And you just run regular water in it? You run
just run regular water. Because when we take it, we take it out and pretend race it, and obviously they don't want anything but water.
Does it have a water pump or is it thermosiphon?
It's got a water pump.
Oh, it does have, okay. Oh.
Yep.
Henry Ford didn't believe in any of that. He just wanted, and it worked. You know, the hot air, the hot water pushed the cold water, you know. There's your water pump greasers right there. Yep. This is your temperature gauge. Is that a temperature gauge? Oh, no. Oh yeah, that's, okay. I see, yeah. And there's your window right there with the splash loop. Little cups throw the water, throw the oil.
Right, or the oil, make sure you still have oil pressure.
Yeah, it goes around, it scoops up the oil and just throws it everywhere. So,
right.
Yeah. And
we want to turn it a couple of times without the mag on, don't we? Yeah. Okay.
We shot a little ether in there. You got it on full. You got it on retard, so you don't break your thumb.
We do, but I'm going to turn it a couple of times without the mag on, just to prime it. Here we go.
Do we hear the terminal coil? Huh? Try now.
Ignition.
Fire in the hole. Sounds good. It out. Oh, very nice. Well, here we go, Ollie.
Well, it's a lot of fun. It's got legs in third gear.
It's got long legs, doesn't it?
Yep.
Well, how exciting would this have been in 1911 when the horse was the fastest thing you'd ever been on?
And your riding mechanic would be the one to make sure nobody's overtaking you and jump out and pack the tire when you have a flat. You were talking about seatbelts earlier. You wouldn't want a seatbelt. You want to be thrown out of this.
Yeah, you want to be thrown way out.
So in 1907, they didn't have the Vanderbilt Cup because of the spectator injuries, and Savannah sold them hard. In the American Automobile Association, told them they would have the militia guarding the course, and they had convict labor build the roads, and they still couldn't get the Vanderbilt Cup there, so they just decided to have their own race.
Yeah.
And they called it the Grand Prize of America Cup.
How many years did that run?
1908.
Yeah.
10 and 11. They didn't do it in 9. And in 11, of course, they got the Vanderbilt Cup. And you were talking about the Indianapolis 500. That was really the sort of the, once they started racing on closed tracks, that sort of shut down the racing on
Well, how cool is that with a jet flying over just as you're in that 1911 car?
That's right. 100 years difference in technology. How fast have you taken the Mercer?
Well, it's seen 100 on the Speedo, which is about 92,
right,
I think.
I hope you're on the track.
No, actually I wasn't. I was on the freeway. That was the safest place. Nobody's stopping. Is this a transmission brake or is it on the actual drum?
No, the brake is straps on the rear wheel.
Oh, okay.
And we've adjusted it here recently. In fact, if you jam on it, it might lock up the right rear wheel. But,
yeah.
Our Chalmers has a brake on the drive shaft.
I know it's just catch fire. I've had that happen.
Well, and it's got one pedal, so halfway down the clutch and all the way down the brake.
Yeah.
It's very confusing.
Yeah. Is the motor meter functional or no?
It is. Yeah. It is. It's running cool.
And your red line's about what, 1200, something like that?
Probably.
Yeah.
It can't reach it in third gear, so. In the early 80s up in New York, a guy named Gordon Matson. I think I was reading an account in the EMF magazine of his trip when he took it to, the car was at Pebble Beach in 2005, and he said he ran into you and y'all had a mutual friend in Maine or something.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That was Corbin Benson probably, yeah.
And anyway, he drove it. When he first restored it, it was yellow, and he drove it in the Michigan Mile, and he did all sorts of events with it. He actually didn't even, when he bought it, it was disassembled in a barn. He went there to buy a Jimmy Tenno EMF. He was one of those sort of EMF, people. And after a few months, he started researching the serial number on this car and realized what he had.
Yeah.
He forgot about the other one, and this became what he did for the last 30 years of his life.
I imagine you could have put a modern clutch in there so it eases out a little bit more for you.
If you keep neat foot oil on it and keep it pressed down, it works a little better. So shipping it out here, we didn't do that.
Flip door for magneto, huh?
Yeah.
That's what all the aircraft use.
Oh, really?
My Merlin powered car got a shower spot. You spin it by hand. It throws sparks everywhere, and then you hit the starter button.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty bulletproof.
Nice afternoon ride.
Oh yeah, it goes. It's very nice.
So they sent 3 of these cars to Savannah.
Right.
Number 33, 34, and 35. And Barney Oldfield was there working as a consultant for Firestone, and he told them they ought to use non-skid tires.
Right.
And they said, we'll use it on 2 of them. They used it on the other 2. And those 2 cars came in first and second. This car came in third.
Oh, wow, there you go.
By Jack Tower. Maybe it would have been different if he'd had the non-skid tires.
Thank you so much. This has been a treat.
Well, it was
to ride in a car that actually ran in the race.
It was a treat for us.
I remember reading about the race. Hundreds of thousands of people.
It really was. They slept on it. They brought trains in for people to sleep on. They cleaned out all the people out of the jail. They put beds in the jail.
Well, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Jay.
Great to meet a real old car enthusiast who likes the really old cars.
That's right.
I mean, everybody raves over the early European race cars, but this American stuff was very durable.